Pierre Boulez lived from 1925 to 2016 and was one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century. In the mid-1940s in Paris, during the period he studied with Olivier Messiaen, André Warburg, and René Leibovitz, he began to compose serial music. Most of his compositions from these years were never published or were rescinded, but one of them, Douze Notations from 1945, was eventually published after he began recomposing it for orchestra in the late 1970s. This is his earliest published work. In this piece, we can see elements of influence from the early serial composers like Schoenberg and especially Webern, but we can also see versions of techniques that Boulez would later develop and refine to become his best-known compositional hallmarks. Some of these things include the first movement serving as a microcosm of the whole piece and using the 12-tone row rotationally and partitioning it in a variety of ways. The connection of the 1945 piece with the later recomposition project exemplifies Boulez's approach to the open work concept. The second movement in particular vividly demonstrates Boulez's interest in timbre and register as important domains that are also involved in the serial structure of the piece. This video will focus on these last two elements, showing how chromatic clusters as a type of timbral effect, sometimes in extreme registers, are connected with the row forms used in the piece and the manipulations made to them. The second movement, like all 12 movements of this piece, uses a rotation of the main row form initially presented in the first movement and lasts for 12 measures. The version of the row for this movement is heard in 3 melodic statements. First, the prime form of the row is played starting on pitch class 10, B flat. The next statement also uses a prime form, this time transposed to begin on pitch class 9, A. The final statement uses the retrograde of P10, R10, ending on B flat. These 3 melodic statements are framed by clusters, glissandi, and tremolos. Here is a recording of the piece. There are a few wrinkles with these row forms, however. Every pitch class of the second row statement should be a semitone lower than the corresponding pitch class in the first melodic statement. Pitch class 10 changes to 9, 3 changes to 2, 2 changes to 1, and so on. But in the sixth order position, Boulez uses a pitch class 10 instead of 11, and this statement only contains 11 notes, leaving out the final pitch class 7. The next row statement also has several missing elements. R10 should simply have the pitch classes of P10 in reverse order, but both pitch classes 8 and 7 are missing. These missing notes can be found as G and A flat in the chromatic dyad ostinato that has been present in the top staff since measure 4. In other words, as the melody progresses, it sheds redundant pitch classes, while its rhythms get faster and the overall duration of each melodic segment gets shorter. The B flat that is supposed to be a B in the second statement seems to simply be a case in which Boulez felt that B flat sounded quote-unquote right. One result of pitch class 8 being omitted from the beginning of R10 is that the 3 melodic row statements all begin on pitch classes 9, 10, and 11, with the second 2 statements beginning on the lower and upper neighbors of the first. This chromatic trichord, like the missing pitch classes 7 and 8, is also emphasized in a chromatic cluster, the lowest 3 keys on the piano keyboard which begin and end the movement. Another result of the modifications Boulez makes to these row forms, both the omission of pitch classes 7 and 8 and the alteration of B natural to B flat in the second statement, is the increase in the melodic interval class 5, and specifically intervals of 7 semitones or the perfect fifth. In P10, 3 of 11 melodic intervals are perfect fifths, with 5 of them being interval class 5. In P9, only 2 perfect fifths occur, but now 5 of 10 melodic intervals belong to interval class 5. In R10, the final result is that 6 out of 9 melodic intervals are perfect fifths, realizing each of the interval class 5s in this way. If we compare P10 and R10, it's not too hard to understand why this can happen. R10, being the retrograde of P10, has the pitch classes of P10 but in reverse order, Reading P10 from the end, or R10 from the beginning, we have 8, 11, 6, 7, 1, 5, 0, 4, 9, 2, 3, 10. By eliminating pitch class 8 from the beginning of R10, one interval class 3 is eliminated. By eliminating pitch class 7, F sharp moves directly to C sharp, combining interval class 1 and 6 into interval class 5. Truncating the row in this way eliminates one melodic interval and aligns a pair into a single interval class 5. This increase in interval class 5 as a melodic perfect fifth is also reflected in the clusters at the opening of the movement, when the cluster tremolos in the third measure rise by an interval of 7 semitones or a perfect fifth. This movement, with its broad leaping melodies and compact clusters, is highly gestural overall. The chromatic blocks, sweeping glissandi, and cluster tremolos are all visceral expressions of an intense but short-lived outburst. Between all of these events, almost every key on the piano keyboard is used in this piece. But more than being used merely for effect, Boulez weaves these gestures together in a way that highlights aspects of the serial structure of the movement. The opening and closing A, B-flat, B clusters at the bottom of the keyboard also contains the pitch classes of the beginning of each segment of the melody. The increase in melodic perfect fifths is also replicated in a timbral gesture where the chromatic tetrachord tremolo in measure 3 rises by a perfect fifth, and the kernel of the chromatic cluster, the semitone, gets extracted from the melody to become the accompaniment to the middle section of the piece.